Bro, it's gone on for 23 minutes.
Dude.
Hey everyone, this is Cardfight, bring you another standard match, and unfortunately, the time code on this video does not lie. This is going to be a long one, so I would recommend grab some snacks, grab a drink, settle down, and wait as you watch me torturously try and commentate a half-hour match between Pacifica on the left and Tamayura on the right. So now these are two decks that definitely don't really get a lot of representation. Tamayura has been around for quite some time, since BT5, with it getting a bit more support in set 11, and then of course Pacifica is going to be one of those brand spanking new decks out of Lyrical 4. So mainly let's take a look at what Pacifica is actually able to do in this meta, and see how it stacks up against a kind of, I guess, a bit of an underdog deck. I think Tama has a couple of results. I don't think it's ever topped like an event, but I know it's definitely gotten into like top 8 like once or twice, but this is probably like way back in the day, like set 5 meta or something. But the new support is pretty solid, but we'll see what Tamayura can do. Anyways, we see there on the field, one of the reasons we don't see a lot of Tamayura is because of that order card there that is absolutely necessary, the Broken Toys, which is still sitting at like, I think $30 at the time of this recording. Thankfully, it is getting reprinted again, I think, for our next Springfest season. I could be wrong about that, though. I know it definitely got reprinted for BCS season, but the card is still stupidly expensive. Anyways, it's just kind of an insane card. You check top 7, and then you get to choose a Rurumi and a Rarami from that top 7 or from your drop zone and put them into the soul. And then, of course, if you did put 2 cards, you are allowed to draw a card. And then I believe the grade 1 did something that you definitely saw, and I definitely didn't completely forget what it did. But anyways, we're going to see a draw trigger coming off the top there, hitting to a first damage OT, which is, I guess, kind of unfortunate. Like, you'd like to see that at a better time, but at the same time, it helps the game, you know. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But anyways, Pacifica riding into that grade 2, using the skill of the grade 1, which is going to allow you to look at the top 7 cards of the deck, and then you are going to be able to choose up to 2 Pacificas from the top 7 and add them to the hand. It looks like we are going to get a double hit here, hitting into that Persona Ride as well as the rear guard Pacifica. So we're going to be able to do a whole bunch of maybe 4 to 5 attack shenanigans once we get to that grade 3. Now, of course, Pacifica, I guess if we can kind of talk about it as a deck, honestly, I don't know if people are going to be playing it. It seems fairly strong. It has like a lot of draw power, as we're going to be seeing in this deck. It has very good at bulking, and it has a free tutor for a lot of things. But whether or not that's good enough to stand up in this current meta is anyone's game. Anyways, we do see a little bit of rushing here, calling down the Yuika and a PG to be its attacker. Just swing for a nice 14 there, hitting a pretty good number. Just going to be taking that attack, using the Yuika, of course, to just bounce back that PG. A very nice early aggression play. Going to be swinging this 18k Vanguard, another attack that you don't really want to be guarding. We're not going to see anything in the drive check there, and a front trigger in the damage check. So using the skill of this card, Bernardia, I suppose, when it boosts a successful attack, you get a top 7, and then I believe you get to add a Pacifica, but if you add a Pacifica, she goes to the bottom of the deck. But since we're not going to see anything off that top 7, she is actually going to remain there behind the Vanguard. So definitely a very cool card to just like call behind your Vanguard in the early game and kind of just keep swinging with it, having that on-hit pressure as well as kind of the unguardable pressure from that Vanguard swing, and just like you're risking crits at that point. Anyways, passing back to Tamayura, who also has quite a few cards in hand at this moment, mostly from not guarding either's attacks, discarding the okay, so I definitely have to point this out. I am not going to be able to identify which one is Rarami and which one is Ririmi, so I'm just gonna refer to them both at the same time. Anyways, right into the grade 2, you're gonna add back the one with purple hair. There's one with purple hair and there's one with like lavender hair, I guess. But anyways, we see another Broken Toys here. Gonna be adding back the lavender hair and from the drop zone into the soul, and then I think we got a purple hair one from the top 7. That is going to result in us being able to draw a card. So I guess we picked up the correct one. I think that you can probably calculate your odds of hitting a specific one depending on what you have in hand, what you've already seen. So I guess the odds were better that he would have hit the other one. But anyways, Steel Fourth Tail coming on down here, a card that is very soon going to be jumping up in price thanks to another deck that's going to be coming out here in a couple of weeks. But you actually are able to use it in Tamayura, because in case you don't remember, Fourth Tail adds glitters or stealth units. So we are going to be putting that lavender hair into the soul there. And we're on grade 2, so we could theoretically do a little bit of rushing here as we call down the column. I did have to research Tamayura cards for this video. The way it works... Oh, look, purple hair is called Rarami. We'll see if I can remember that. Anyways, using the Rarami here to Soul Blast 2 and draw a card, and then calling the Ririmi behind it, because the way it works is you put the grade 1 behind the opposite of the grade 2, and then they get their skills, which we may be seeing here in a little bit as we swing just 18 at the Vanguard. Just going to be taking that, not hitting to any defensive there, as we put both of them into the soul and just swing the Vanguard for another bit there. That's also going to be hitting into the damage zone, a copy of the Rearguard Pacifica, which is definitely not great. There's always a chance of healing it out, so it's not the end of the world. You can put it back on the bottom of the deck and recycle it in the deck, but we do see a Valshabran being discarded there, Soul Blasting 1, and then just drawing the card. And then the skill of the grade 2 of the ride line is going to reduce Pacifica's skill by Counterblast 1, meaning that the only cost is going to be to bot deck a card from your hand, and then you can actually just draw 2 cards. You just straight up just draw 2 cards. A straight +1 for CB1 and bot deck a card. You're not even like discarding it, so you're not like, you know, you're not running out of cards in hand. So just overall pretty good. Unfortunately, the one reason why you might not want to be using that grade 1 all the time behind the Vanguard is because the back row centered slot is kind of reserved for the, the Rearguard Pacifica, because she is going to be able to attack from the middle back row, which I believe she needs to just for her effect. Theoretically, I think she can attack from the back row in most places. I could be wrong about that. I guess when she pops up, we'll go ahead and take a look at her. But since the opponent's Vanguard is not at grade 3 yet, it isn't going to be getting an extra 10k. Let's see about on the attacks. Oh no, it can only attack from the back row center rearguard circle. So yeah, that spot is kind of just reserved for the Pacifica. And then of course putting it into the Vanguard, into the soul, allows you to give 5k and draw another card. So Pacifica, definitely a deck that has a ton of draw power and sustainability, as well as a whole bunch of tutoring here, as we are going to be seeing the Pacifica skill here, Counterblasting 1 and Soul Blasting 1, to call another copy of that Rearguard Pacifica out of the deck. And it looks like, I think we were able to see it there, the card we decked for Pacifica skill was actually a copy of Persona Ride, because I believe that other Rearguard there in front of the Yuika is actually a copy of Pacifica Persona Ride. So with the Yuika, of course, we can just pass it back to the hand, as we're going to be flipping over the top 2 cards here, getting into a critical trigger here. So we still do have 3 more attacks coming in from this turn, so we do kind of have to decide where it should go. We could give it to the cycle card to give it an extra umph and make it hit, even though, you know, even if our opponent gets a defensive. But instead we're going to give it to that back row Pacifica, swing for 23. That is just going to be a 15k guard, so not a huge deal, but we are still going to be able to use its skill in order to add an extra 5k. I think in this instance we just add it to the cycle card over there to make it hit better numbers. Yeah, so it's good hitting for 18, which is going to be calling for a 10k guard. And then this other column is still just 21, because, you know, Yuika's not going to be giving any power. But we're going to be swinging there for the 18. We're going to either have to take this one or, you know, give up the 10k guard there, which theoretically we do have the dolls, but looks like we are going to be taking it, not hitting into defensive, and this other swing is just going to be for 21, which can block by another 15k. So once again, in case you didn't notice there, the reason why we didn't give the 5k to Pacifica, even though it was maybe the weaker attack, but you would have reached the 26k threshold, and then of course that is not really a threshold. I don't know why I called it one, but it doesn't exceed 28, so it just makes more sense to give it to the cycle card there. You were able to push to 1 damage, and then of course just using the Yuka skill to bounce back the Persona Ride for next turn. And then you can see there that Pacifica has an absolutely massive hand at this moment. So definitely not going to have any problems guarding these next couple of attacks. Although we'll see how well Tamayura can pop off. Although, because Tamayura can do some things on its first grade 3 turn, but I will say that the deck is not as powerful as it going into its turn 4, as we are going to be seeing, hopefully, during the next turn. But riding into that grade 3 Tamayura doesn't actually get you anything, but looks like we are just going to be swinging straight up with the Vanguard, not calling anything, because Tamayura is just going to be calling out 2 rearguards, the Ririmi and the Rarami there. I mean, if we had like good rearguards to call, we probably could have called those and gotten into like 5 attacks. But of course, I don't really think Tamayura tends to play too many of those cards anymore, just because the amount of glitters you have to play with the 2 dolls, it's kind of is a little overwhelming on deck space. So playing like 4 copies of each of these dolls is like, I don't know, that's like half your deck there. But anyways, we do see the, what's his name, Rarami, Soul Blasting 2, Soul Blasting 1 of each of the grade 1 dolls, and then of course using 2 more Counter Blast in order to call them out when they are Soul Blasted. They're basically Chamomiles in this instance, and of course putting behind their respective Direful doll is going to allow them to use their skills to the fullest. Currently, they are just 18k columns, which is not the greatest. It doesn't really hit over defensive, but at the same time, like, do you want to be taking this Vanguard attack? It's a little bit risky because you could flip over a critical trigger there, but it's not a huge deal because you are still at 2. So you can definitely take this Vanguard swing, but at the same time, you have so many cards in hand, you can probably just afford to guard it. But it looks like we are just going to be taking the Vanguard swing. Probably a good play because you want to kind of bet on those defensives, because you can shut down these attacks with just like 1 single defensive, or make them like pretty much pathetically easy to guard. It looks like we are giving the power from the draw trigger that we got there to the Rarami. Kind of an interesting play, because as we're going to be seeing, that Rarami is going to be getting an extra 5k from this other Rarami. So not giving the power there means that if we had hit a defensive there, we would not have been able to hit with this attack. But thankfully, we didn't actually hit a defensive, so we are going to be able to swing 18 at the Vanguard, going to be blocked by a 15k guard, and now this Rarami is swinging for a clean 33, which is a still pretty decent number. Going to be hitting into another blank there, and then of course using the skill of the Ririmi to suck up the Rarami, and then its skill allows you to Soul Blast 1, and then if you haven't counter charged yet this turn, you can counter charge 1. So the deck is somewhat able to sustain itself with its resources, as we are going to be seeing in this match, and that is going to be very necessary as we see Pacifica Persona riding, and we're looking at a pretty strong series of attacks here. If we have another Pacifica, that's going to be pretty cool, and we're going to call out a card that's definitely going to actually help us maybe get there. This is the Burning Horn clone. You counterblast 1, check top 7, add your grade 3 from the top 7, but if you don't, you get to counter charge, which looks like we are actually going to be whiffing there on the Pacifica. I think there's already like 3 out, so I guess it wasn't that big of a chance, because like we have the Persona Ride, we saw one go back into the deck, let's see, we put 2 of the rearguard Pacificas in the soul already, I think, and then 1 is in the damage zone, so things might be a little bit difficult in terms of just getting that first Pacifica. But it looks like we are seeing the Pacifica skill, bot decking a card, and then drawing 2 more. We're going to be drawing into, I think that was double trigger, a front and a critical trigger, so kind of lacking on good rearguards here. We do have a bit of an empty board. We are missing 2 back row units. Of course, that back row center column is kind of just reserved for the rearguard Pacifica, so we don't realistically want to be calling anything there, but looks like we are just going to be committing a cat and opting not to use its effect, because we actually don't have anything on in the drop to get back, because the right deck Pacifica is still in the soul, and I don't think we have another copy in the drop zone. So it looks like we're deciding whether we want to put that on-hit card, that on-hit grade 1 into the back row. I believe Pacifica also has another card that allows you to like recycle Pacificas, but looks like we're going to opt to not do that. Instead, just using the Pacifica skill, swinging at the Vanguard, and probably calling the rearguard Pacifica from the deck just to get those 4 attacks. Unfortunately, we didn't have one in hand to call, and we had to call off the Vanguard Pacifica. Damn, this is definitely not confusing at all. But anyways, calling down that Pacifica just to get our 4 attacks. So we're looking at fairly strong attacks here. Let's see, that other column is going to be a 23 currently. It's going for go up to 28, as we'll see. We have a 23 column here, and then of course that other column is for 31, or even if we get a defensive, that's still going to be 41 there. So we're looking at a lot of strong attacks. Taking the Vanguard swing, hitting into a heal trigger there. We can technically live 1 critical trigger, so it's not the end of the world, giving the power to the rearguard Pacifica there, as yeah, deciding we're going to do there. And then second check is going to be that critical trigger. So we are not dead here, but unfortunately this is going to be putting a whole bunch of pressure on us because we do have to guard these remaining 3 attacks. But if we do take a look at the Tamayura hand, there are definitely quite a bit of cards in there. The hand is, I would say, plentiful. So our survivability is still pretty good at this point, as the back row Pacifica is going to be swinging for 43, a pretty strong number, especially since we didn't see a single defensive in that damage check. And then of course, actually also attacking from the back row is going to proc the skill of the grade 2 there. It gets another 5k, making it into a 28k column. So that's going to be a pretty powerful attack coming from both other lanes, I suppose. As we just kind of do have to decide how we want to guard this, because we do have to guard this. This 43 is a really awkward number because we have, that's going to call for a 3-card guard. So I think in most cases you PG this. You either PG this or you kind of have to commit, what is it? Ooh, looks like we're going to be committing that over trigger. So we have over triggers out from both players at this instance. Oh, and I almost forgot about the extra 5k that comes with the grade 3 Pacifica. Going to be giving the power to the cycle card. Looking back at this, maybe we should have given it to the grade 2 because it's going to make it hit a better number, because that cycle card is already hitting 31, so making it 36 doesn't make that much of a difference. But if we had given it to the 5 cases grade 2, it would have been 43, which would have hit a good power threshold, because that would have been a 20k shield and a 15k shield, or 2 15s and a 5. But looks like we are using the Yuika skill. Probably going to have to try that again, see if we get a second Pacifica off the top 7. And this 36 is going to be calling for a 4-card guard there. So going to be guarding with a total of 20k shield. I guess the 5k mattered just a little bit. I mean, it got 1 more card out of hand, and the other column was PG'd anyway, so in the end it didn't matter a whole ton. I mean, it did get him an extra 5k out of hand, so it was fairly impactful, but I don't know. I've already been commentating for almost 20 minutes at this point, so yeah, I'm a little bit running out of things to say. But anyways, riding into the new Tamayura here, on place is actually going to let you fetch out any order from your deck or drop zone, as long as it is not a Regalius piece. And we are going to be adding this Fox art here, which, as we're going to be seeing, is actually a pretty decent play. Very nice card to search off of the Tamayura. And then, of course, in typical ride over fashion, we are going to be activating that Persona ride. So that, along with Tamayura's passive skill, it gives you, the player, not the Vanguard, the skill that all your front row units get an extra 5k. So that extra 5k will stick around even if you do ride into another Vanguard, which of course this new Tamayura technically is, even though we are able to Persona ride. So giving a total of 15k to the front row. We're looking at some pretty strong attacks here, but that being said, I'm sure everyone is still staring at that Pacifica hand. Probably not right now. but you know what I'm saying. That is a very fat hand. It is going to take some very big numbers and a lot of attacks in order to crack that hand. But anyways, the what's it called? The Fox Art is going to be activated here. You Soul Blast 2, and then you get to call a Ririmi and a Rarami from your drop zone, I believe. And then, of course, it looks like we are going to be using the skill, the Ririmi this time, Soul Blasting the 2 Rarami and Ririmi grade 1s in order to put that Cycle card into the Soul, just getting it off board. And then, of course, counterblasting 2 more to get the grade 1s out of the drop zone and onto the board. We're going to be attacking this first swing for 33, so a very nice swing, not hitting into a defensive there, giving an extra 5k power to the Vanguard, kind of just having a little bit of extra pressure. Personally, maybe we could have given it to the Rarami there in order to make it hit a little bit of a better number, because right now it is still just hitting 33. 30 would have been a little bit of a better number, but at the same time, that's still just like a 215k guard. That's a 30k guard. So it doesn't make a huge difference, and it looks like we're going to be taking it anyway, so the power didn't really matter at all in that case. So I'm going to be using the skill of the Ririmi in order to soul it, put it into the soul. That's going to allow us to Soul Blast 1 and countercharge another one, and then swing with the new Tamayura. You're going to be able to bind the old Tamayura and call out a Ririmi as well as a Rarami here. And then, of course, those called units do get another 5k added to their power, so they're getting a total of 20k already, so they're 30k beaters. And then, of course, using the skill of the Rarami, I believe, Soul Blasting the 2 in order to draw another card, and then once again, since we have the CB, Counter Blasting the 2 in order to call them both back out. So those were 30k swings, now they're 38k swings, all on their own, not accounting for any triggers. So this Vanguard is just going to be getting PG'd, flipping over a heal trigger, which is going to be pretty impactful, because essentially that means we can take another attack on this next turn. Kind of deciding where we want to put the power here. It is very difficult to decide what is the correct option, because like I said, on one hand, you do kind of want to swing with the Ririmi first because you give another 5k, but I don't know, like, you want to give the power to the thing with the that's going to be swinging the strongest, right? But you also want to give power to the other you want to give power to the weakest column is what I'm trying to say. But if you give power to one column, the other column becomes the weaker column. So it looks like we did. It's not really going to matter because we're going to flip over double triggers. They're hitting into a critical trigger there, kind of just increasing the total amount of power we have here. So this 38 is going to go into a 48, which is going to be calling down two 20k guards for 53, using the cat as well as a front trigger, getting us to a total of 53, blocking that attack. Then of course using the Rarami there to put both of them into the soul, and then giving another 5k to the Ririmi, swinging this column a total of 53. That is going to be a 45k guard. But at the same time, look at Pacifica's hand. That is just absolutely stacked. Not going to be a huge problem guarding this. We see two 15k shields come on down, and I believe we just need another 15k shield, and we have guarded it successfully. So those were really big, massive swings, and Pacifica was just able to easily tank it, and we still have a ton of cards in hand. As it looks like we draw into another trigger. I think Pacifica just consistently keeps drawing into its triggers. Looks like unfortunately we don't have the Persona Ride for the follow-up, which is kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, we should still be able to sustain ourselves. Tamayura at this point is, I almost want to say it's out of gas, because we have no face-up damage. We can take one more damage, and that's going to allow us to get a counterblast of 1. But without that 2 CB, you can't really call two of the grade 1 Direful Dolls anymore. So your power gets that much weaker. If you can't Persona Ride, you still have the extra 5k, so everything is going to be hitting pretty aggressively. But at the same time, you're almost out of gas, and you just need to push that 1 damage. You just need to hit for 1 more damage. But Pacifica's hand and defenses are just that big. They're just, your chances of hitting through that are still so slim, unless you can have another a massively powerful turn as you did last turn, but without the resources, how are you going to get there? The answer is pretty much you're not. Anyways, we did see a Persona Ride. Looks like we got it off of either the draws or something else that I wasn't paying attention to. But calling it down, boosting with the Yuika, using the Yuika skill once again in order to bounce back the Persona Ride. Looks like we kind of do have a lack of good attackers. We just have too many triggers in hand, but using the Pacifica skill, counterblasting the one, soul blasting the one, calling out another rear guard. Looks like we are probably out of rear guard Pacificas at this point, so we're just going to be calling out another cycle card, which is probably our next best attacker in this situation. Even if we hit a defensive trigger off of this whatever attack we end up taking, that thing's still going to be hitting for a pretty decent number. So just guarding it with a 15 for a 2 to pass, flipping over nothing there. It kind of does make sense. I mean, we've seen so many triggers coming out of the hand that it makes sense that Pacifica is kind of running low on triggers at this point. But without a defensive trigger, this is just going to be swinging for a 13, a pretty easy and weak attack here, as an 18k coming from the other column is going to be easily blocked by that critical trigger. So hopefully Tamayura has something to do on the follow-up. We do have that one counter blast there, so we do have some plays. Even if we miss out on the Persona Ride, we will still be able to do things. And looks like, unfortunately, we missed out on the second Persona Ride. If we had been able to Persona Ride here, I don't know if we would have been able to close things out, because without 2 CB, it's kind of difficult to get that amount of power. I think we would have had to seen a, which one's the counter charger? I think the Rarami grade 1 is the counter charger. We would have had to see a grade 1 Rarami there, as well as like 2 more columns. But the Rarami would have to boost the Ririmi, so I don't even know how we were getting there. You would have had to have the perfect hand in order to actually, do that. But looks like we're not even going to call anything out here. Instead, we're just going to be swinging with the Vanguard, using its skill to counterblast 1. So unfortunately, using that last counterblast to call out a copy of a Ririmi as well as a Rarami. And looks like we're going to be making just 1 column here. So on one hand, it does seem like maybe that might not be the best play, because you kind of need to finish the game here. But at the same time, you just are you're kind of lacking that power. You don't have the power that you're going to need in order to actually finish things this turn through that massive hand. So what we're doing here is actually pretty smart, because we're kind of sustaining ourselves so that we're actually going to be able to have a next turn regardless of whether we are able to Persona Ride. So it looks like we see another cat come down here. I think that's the 3rd cat actually coming on down for, I believe, let's see, that is 2848. That is going to be a no pass, drive checking into 2 blanks there. And then it looks like we're just going to swing this other column for just a nice 23. That's just going to call down a 15k guard, and then going to be using the Rarami skill there to put both of them into the soul, which is of course going to allow you to soul blast 1. It's going to be soul blasting a random doll in order to countercharge 1, so that assuming we're able to tank this next turn, we are going to have a pretty good, or not pretty good, we are actually going to still be able to do things next turn, I should say. Anyways, Pacifica is starting off with a Persona Ride here, so things are definitely a little bit dicey. Tamayura still has 5 cards in hand, so there is the possibility of, actually surviving this. But that being said, these attacks are still going to be hitting for pretty strong numbers, as this first attack is just going to be a 28, guarding with that trigger, and then using that Blitz order, which is going to allow you to give the skill to the Guardian, where you can just add it back to your hand. So kind of conserving a 15k shield there, almost just doubling your shield value there. Using the skill of the grade 1 is actually going to let you put 2 Pacificas from the drop zone at the end of the battle boost. I think you retire it and then put 2 Pacificas. If you put 2, you get a countercharge 2. Or countercharge 1, which is going to allow us to use the Pacifica skill once again to counterblast 1 and soul blast 1, calling out that rearguard Pacifica that we just put back in the deck and enabling us to get that 4th attack. Now, Pacifica is just swinging for a 23 here. almost forgetting to Soul Blast there for the cost. And looks like we're going to be PGing that with the Elementaria as we flip over to drive checks, and we're going to be seeing 2 blanks off there, but that is another Persona Ride. So if we don't close things out here, there is almost a 0% chance that we're not going to be able to close it out in the next turn. But it's the Rear Guard Pacifica for 23, guarding it with a 15k shield there, and then the extra 5k is going to be going to that cycle card, which unfortunately is not going to be able to seal the deal because we see a PG coming on down. Now that could have just been a 15k guard, but you know, PG does the same thing, and you know, maybe we didn't have that 15k guard here. But looks like once again we whiffed on the write up. We still do have the extra 5k, but things here are looking very direful for Tamayura. Anyways, counterblasting the 1. I think at this point, I understand the idea of kind of sustaining yourself. You have Radami to... Is it Radami or is it Radami? I can't tell what color her hair is. I think that's the Radami. I think I've already forgotten which one is which over the course of this video. Can you blame me? It's been so long. I'm so tired. This has been going on for 30 minutes. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh, I think you do kind of have to push here. I mean, you're in the same situation. Like, you can't beat through that hands. Like, your attacks aren't going to be powerful enough. They're just like 5k guards. Like, you can just intercept with them. But at the same time, this is your last chance, right? Like, maybe you can sustain. You're going to end up with 5 cards in hand, but Pacifica's still going to have... I think we saw Persona right there. That's still 3 to 4 attacks that are going to be very powerful. And not only that, your deck is getting pretty thin. I mean, both players' decks are getting pretty thin. I think you just kind of have to go for the throat here, as we did see a front trigger there. 10k power just absolutely wasted. But at the same time, take a look at Pacifica's hand. I think there's 2 PGs in there and like pretty much every single trigger in the deck. But we are going for the same play as we did last turn, putting them both into Soul Blasting the 1, and counter charging so that we have a next turn. All we have to really do is survive this turn, and then maybe we can finally close it out. But unfortunately, we did see a copy of Broken Toys in the drive check last turn, which is going to make it that much more difficult to actually survive this turn. And to make matters worse, we see a Pacifica coming on down there from the hand. So this is just going to be 4 attacks. We can't use Pacifica's skill anymore. Easily blocking that with just a 15k guard, giving the 5k to that other rear guard up there, so making it an even worse number for you. Let's see, what is it? 18, 28, 33 now. The Vanguard swing for 28 on its own. I believe we gave the extra power from the Rear Guard Pacifica to that Vanguard. Going to be throwing down a front trigger for a 1 to pass. Drive check 1, drive check 2, nothing there. It's going to be a successful guard with only 3 cards in hand. Honestly, like, the chances of Pacifica hitting a trigger are probably 0. If you want, you can go through the video and count how many triggers have been seen, but I'm not going to do that because I don't really care that much. But anyways, we are going to be able to guard this last attack with a 33, but unfortunately this final attack, just a 10k guard, is going to be enough to cinch it, but looks like we are not going to have that, and that is going to finally be the end of the match. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.